What's happening, guys? Well, bringing you guys updates, letting you know what I'm up to behind the scenes here. Here's the T-Bird that I'm working on, and the Daytona. You might be wondering, what am I up to with these things? Oh yeah, and if you've got a T595, you'll know exactly what the little leak diapers are for. Fun tip though, if you use silicone as your thread locker, if you will, or a thread sealer, it'll keep that tank from leaking at those buttons. What's happening, guys? Well, giving you a sneak peek as to what I am up to and give you guys a bit of an update as far as some motorcycling adventure that I've had. So, working on the T-Bird and working on the Triumph. Here's a quick clue as to what I'm doing with both of those bikes. Let's get into it. Okay, so for the T-Bird, what I've done is I have removed the old tender, that battery tender lead. It's going to be exiting right there now because, well, this one was getting a little bit cooked. I'm not the one that did the original install, but I really should have tracked this down and inspected it before I started playing around with this bike to begin with. And that's on me, but here's the thing. This was loosely installed and this connector was hitting the exhaust. The bike had a weird little short, which is strange because that 7.5 amp fuse unaffected. Anyway, yeah, that connector was starting to melt and trying to short itself out on the exhaust. So problem solved. So what's up with the torque wrench? By the way, that is a new torque wrench. Well, let's dive into the easy part first. Okay guys, so if you have a motorcycle with clip-ons, that is that the handlebar clips onto the actual fork itself, you will notice that there is a bolt that holds this whole thing together. It clamps to that. There's not an actual bolt receiver on the fork. It actually is its own entity. Well, that bolt has to be tight. And on this motorcycle, it is specifically 22 foot-pounds. If it's not torqued to 22 foot-pounds or just over time they get loose and let's say you're not nut and bolting your bike the way that you should, well, after a long right-hand sweeper and you're apexing this long right-hand sweeper going to full throttle and then you notice that your handlebar feels like it's falling off. Kind of a weird situation, and in that type of a situation, you can't just chop throttle. You have to stay in the throttle and roll out of it very softly, which is what I did. Any kind of sudden jerk on or off throttle can upset the chassis, cause you to break traction, and that's not a good day. So what I had to do was basically control the motorcycle in a fast right-hand turn or right-hand sweeper with my left hand while that thing dangled and flopped around. That right-hand side controls your main source of go, which is your throttle, and your main source of whoa, which is your front brake. Good times. And then I got to ride the bike home. So I did torque that back down to 22 foot-pounds, and yes, I did check the other one to make sure that it was tight. Last but not least, moving on to the Katana, what is that? That is a new Vortex rear sprocket, getting rid of the factory plain white metal one that comes from the factory on these bikes. Now, why am I showing you this? Well, this sprocket is held onto the carrier by 6 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The torque spec is about 44 foot-pounds. Well, remember when I showed you this torque wrench and, well, here's what happened. Okay, so the old torque wrench, well, it wasn't reading torque correctly. So when I was putting this sprocket on, I actually way over-torqued those things onto the carrier. Now this carrier is not like a solid piece of metal. It's got rubber on the back of it. It's kind of a dampening thing, if you will, back there. So over-tightening can be a real problem. I recognized this about, I don't know, maybe halfway through the actual torque sequence. I thought this is not really, it's not tightening the right way. So I loosened everything up and yeah, sure enough, the torque wrench was not operating properly. So it's in the trash. And what I was able to do is get the sprocket onto that carrier and check it, making sure that the torque was at about that 44 foot-pound range. Everything seems to be okay. Everything's checking out fine and it's holding torque just great. No extra threads or anything like that. I didn't pull the stud through anything, but I am keeping an eye on it and I am checking it, mainly because, well, I get a little bit sketched out in scenarios like this, but the studs seem to be fine and they never got super tight, but they did get tighter than they should have. But again, I loosened everything up, got everything more or less hand tight, and have verified the torque spec with a torque wrench that I know for a fact works, because it's new. How could it not be good, right? Yeah, so is the other one. So with that, guys, I'll go ahead and button this up. I will show you, if you've never seen the intake side of one of these T-Birds, this is your air filter, and it draws air in right in from underneath your butt. There you go, underneath. You are integral to the intake of this bike. So that's where that thing seats, and these are the intakes. Fun fact if you've never seen that. All right, guys, so with that, I got to get to work and wrap these things up. There's a day in the life, a little peek behind the curtain, if you will. Post up your comments, and we'll catch you on the next one.